This is a little unconventional because the website, as I say, is under attack. Okay, thank you very much for letting me know about the sound. It looks like we're okay. And Robert is going to be on a phone line. It may be because I posted an article pointing to the A-list celebrities that may be leaving the U.S. and there's no guarantee about that. We do have information. Alex Jones, I guess it's Paul Joseph Watson, I think is his name, if I've got it right, posted an article about that with regard to James Cameron. And then there is a source of mine who also indicated this to me. There's a lot of reasons why certain celebrities may want to leave at this time that you can probably guess at, and that's what the article was about. Now, I don't know if that's why this site is down all day, or if it's because we're about to interview Robert Sullivan tonight, or if it's because we are going to interview Sophia Stewart, the real author of the Matrix and Terminator movies, tomorrow night. So we have an interesting lineup this week, as you can see, and I hope you'll be sticking with us and come back tomorrow, actually at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to hear. That's Pacific time, Sophia Stewart. So, Robert, welcome. Are you still there?
Yes, hello, Carrie. I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you for having me on Project Camelot. It's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, you're coming in loud and clear on my end.
Okay, great. And like I say, I didn't know you were quite so controversial, so maybe you can illuminate me, so to speak, about whether or not you think the website would be taken down because I'm going to interview you, or whether or not you think that perhaps that's not the reason. Now, because I don't have my website and my information in front of me here, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, and I apologize for that, that I can't even really give you much of a background. I am showing your website, so that is kind of useful for the viewer, and I'm going to go to About the Author so people can see a picture of you and put that on the screen. And it says here that you're a philosopher, historian, antiquarian, jurist, theologian, writer, and lawyer. So apparently you're quite an educated man. Do you want to give yourself a background?
Yeah, sure, Terry. That's not a problem. Again, thank you for having me on your show. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV, and I am the author of two books. One is titled The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism. This book came out in 2012. The other book is more recent. The other book came out about 6 to 8 months ago. That is titled Cinema Symbolism, A Guide to Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies. The first book, I should just point out that you go to my website and read about the author. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. And I should point out to the listeners that I'm a Freemason. I joined a Masonic lodge here in Baltimore, Maryland in 1997. This was a Blue Lodge called Amicable St. John's Lodge number 25. I am also a 32nd degree in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. This is the Valley of Baltimore, Orient of Maryland. I am a college graduate, having graduated Gettysburg College in 1995. I spent my junior year abroad at Oxford University studying European history and philosophy. And it was really over there that became interested in what I would call the Hermetic tradition, the esoteric, the occult, and how all this was influencing material culture. And the Royal Arch of Enoch, and I'm also a lawyer. I graduated law school. That was Widener University in Delaware. That was in 2000 that I graduated that. And the Royal Arch of Enoch, my first book, was really the product of 20 years of research and writing that began, like I said, when I was an associate student at Oxford. This would have been back in 1992, 93. I won't belabor this. The Royal Arch of Enoch book, it does have some controversial aspects to it. It is funny because, and I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but of late I have done shows, and as I get into sort of the Enochian concept, was some of the teams within Freemasonry, the lines are dropped, or the calls are dropped, or it just has been blacked out, or I've been talking and I've been disconnected and not realized it. So, you know, I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. But the Royal Arch of Enoch book, and anytime you want to jump in here, Terry, please feel free and interrupt me if you've got any questions or anything.
Sure,
like
don't worry.
Yeah.
I'm not shy about that kind of thing, but I do want to hear about your book, and I'm going to put that on the screen here for people to see, the Royal Arch of Enoch, or Ark of Enoch. Go ahead.
Right. The Royal Arch of Enoch, the main thesis of that book was that within Freemasonry, you have the Blue Lodge system coming on the map officially in 1717. The high degree system doesn't come a little later. That comes out of France, out of Paris, France in the 1740s, 1750s. And what I was discovering was this one particular degree, which is critical within Freemasonry, titled the Royal Arch of Enoch. It's actually an arch. It is an archway.
Okay.
It is incorporating this particular ritual, which documents what is called the recovery of the lost word of a Master Mason. This is what is lost in the Blue Lodge. It's recovered in this higher degree ceremonial. And I'm really plowing over a ton of information here. You can ask me specific questions. But in a nutshell, this ritual was incorporating elements of the lost Book of Enoch, or 1 Enoch, which, according to mainstream history, was off the history pages, lost to Western civilization from around the 2nd, 3rd century A.D. up until 1773, when a man named James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with copies, and even then it wasn't translated until 1821. So the main thesis was that there must be this lost copy out there that someone had, that this Masonic ritual and its underlying philosophy is clearly incorporating elements and components of the Book of Enoch. And this is really important within Freemasonry because the degree is very important. And again, I'm just being very general here. It's a lot of the symbolism and the philosophy that is really being incorporated in things like the cultivation and the development of the United States, symbolisms in the Federal District in Baltimore and New York, the Erie Canal, that is really coming out of this Royal Arch degree. And just to bring it up to speed, the final chapter of this book dealt with what I would call Masonic, Enochian, solar symbolisms that I was seeing in popular movies such as National Treasure, Being There, Da Vinci Code, much more than was on the surface, very adroitly hidden, themes and symbols. And this very impressed me, and I became fascinated with this subject matter. And when Royal Arch came out, I really continued on. Really, cinema symbolism is a kind of an extension of this last chapter of Royal Arch of Enoch, where I got into mythological, alchemical, numerological, astrological. We get into concepts of Carl Gustav Jung and the collective unconscious, and just a lot of these very mystical and occult themes that are turning up in movies all over the place. But in some instances, they are very well hidden by the directors and the producers. And a lot of religion, astrology, archetypical imagery from the tarot cards, tarot embodiment. And this was really, my second book, Cinema Symbolism, was really an extension of this final chapter of Royal Arch of Enoch. So Royal Arch of Enoch came out in 2012, and Cinema Symbolism came out about 6-8 months ago. And, those are my two books, and, I'll be more than happy to, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So can you tell us why you got into all of this, and also what do you have a degree with? What degree are you within Freemasonry? Sure.
I began. I really sort of got involved with this when I was at Oxford University in 1992-93. It was really over there that I got introduced to this idea of this Hermetic tradition. It's really the best way I can describe it. Things, coming out of the Renaissance into the Enlightenment, carried forward by secret societies. Just mysticism, the occult, Kabbalah, and just how they were influencing society on a material level, on a political level, on a social level, on a religious level, a spiritual level. And again, when I was over there, I was only a junior in college, but it was just always interested me. Even as a child, I always used to watch the old In Search of show with Leonard Nimoy. And it was just a subject that just really interested me. I came back to the States and I graduated Gettysburg And it was in between when I was out of Gettysburg, but before I went to law school. I was broached about joining a Masonic lodge. I wasn't broached. I broached someone who was in the lodge. You may have heard the term "to be one, ask one." In my family, my great-grandfathers, my grandfathers, there's a long tradition in my family of the men joining Freemasonry. It was always something I was interested in, and the opportunity presented itself in 1996. And it was through a friend of my mother and father. And I said, I see you're a Mason. He wore the ring, with the square and compasses on it. And I said, I'm very interested in joining. He said, no problem. We'll start the ball rolling. And I joined a Blue Lodge of Freemasons. This is degrees 1, 2, and 3. This is entered apprentice, fellowcraft, and master Mason. That was done in 1997. And then a lot of my relatives had gone into the Scottish Rite. There are two high-degree systems in the United States, the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. They are not mutually exclusive. You can join one, you can join both, you can join neither. It is entirely up to you. And in 1999, I joined the Scottish Rite temple here in Baltimore, and I'm a 32nd degree of that.
Okay, so as a 32nd degree, do you feel that you're being excluded from some of the more secret knowledge, as they call it?
No, not really. I've never encountered that. I've never felt that way. I think that a lot of the within the Scottish Rite, the 33rd degree is honorary, so that's by invitation only. You can't solicit that. A lot of the esoteric wisdom, I believe, is contained within a lot of these degrees, and especially the Royal Arch degree. That really is sort of it's the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite. That really is the end of the story of Freemasonry. That's really sort of the highest degree in Freemasonry. A lot of the degrees in the Scottish Rite, I know they're numerologically higher, but they actually take place before the 13th degree. So no, I would say I've never felt like, that I was excluded or anything. I'm not a 33rd degree. I never claimed to be. But I think there's a lot in those degrees that, I wrote the Royal Arch of Enoch book. Is nearly 700 pages, and that's just really about one degree in particular. So, there's a lot of wisdom hidden in those degrees, both in the Blue Lodge and the high degree system.
Okay, and you know that obviously the Masons have somewhat of a bad name at this time, sure. Simply because of the Illuminati. What's your feeling about all of that?
Yeah, Masonry does have, I'm familiar with this. It can get a bad rap. I understand that. The Illuminati certainly was a real development. I am not convinced that it is around anymore. I would be highly skeptical, me personally, of any person or group identifying themselves as the Illuminati. I have never encountered any such group in my time with Freemasonry. Obviously, Masonry. There was a massive in the 1820s, a massive anti-Masonic movement in this country, and you could craft an argument that Masonry has never fully recovered because of this. That is, very, I wouldn't argue with that point too much. I do think Masonry is making a bit of a comeback, and I think that reason for that is the younger generation that is joining it is definitely more interested in sort of the esoteric symbolism and the mystical teachings of it. And this has been something that has been excluded really from craft Masonry since this anti-Masonic movement of the 1820s. Masonry underwent a massive attack in the United States in the 1820s through something called the William Morgan Affair. And in order to survive this anti-Masonic furor, Masonry distanced itself from what you would call sort of the esoteric and mystical tradition, and it just emerged as, hey, we're just a fraternity, we just do philanthropic work. That's it, nothing more to the story. And this was really the philosophy that really carried Masonry forward through the 19th century and through most of the 20th century. Even when I joined it in 1997, there was really no, discussion at all of any sort of mystical symbolism or anything like that. But the younger crowd coming in, they're much more interested because in this material. And again, likely because of the proliferation of the internet and Dan Brown and National Treasure and things like that. So there does seem to be a renewed interest in Masonry, which I think is a good thing, and it seems to be for this esoteric wisdom, and I think that's also a good thing. But you're right. Masonry has its detractors. It's had it since day one, and I'm sure 100 years from now, they'll still be around.
Oh, okay. Well, do you sort of acknowledge, or are you aware of Skull and Bones and organizations such as that?
Oh, of course. Yes, Skull and Bones, I get into in the book. And, of course, you have globalist groups, certainly like Bilderberg and things of that nature. I'm completely aware of that. Again, you could craft an argument, I suppose, that with Skull and Bones you could see some Illuminati influence upon that. You will certainly see Illuminati influences on the development of this country. That's very well documentable. Just as an organization, though, I am not convinced that the Bavarian Illuminati of 1776, they seem to have gone into extinction many moons ago.
Are you aware of the P2 Lodge?
Yes, I am. I am aware of that. And again, this is a lodge of Blue Lodge Masons in Italy, which had ties to the Vatican. Again, I am not certain of any sort of, I guess you could craft an argument that this has some sort of, sinister meaning with Freemasonry. I mean, I don't deny that Masonry has certainly influenced many of things, especially in this country. But again, I would say I don't know if this is the Illuminati of 1776.
Okay. Well, are you aware of our interview? I mean, I don't know how well you know Project Camelot, but for example, have you seen my interview with Leo Zagami?
Oh, no, I haven't. I have not seen that.
Are you aware of him?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Okay. Well, the P2 Lodge has a headquarters, from what I understand, in south of France. It may be just one of the headquarters, but maybe you're not aware of that.
No, this is a little beyond my bailiwick of expertise. I've heard of the P2 Lodge, but and I'm familiar with its ties to the Vatican, and of course there was a big scandal over this, and allegedly a person was hanged in London, a banker, because of this. But this is really somewhat beyond my area of expertise.
Okay. Well. Yeah. I mean, certainly it is interesting. And I don't mean to put you on the spot too seriously here. And I appreciate that some Freemasons feel that, they are trying to work on the positive side of what was the original, I guess, intent behind Freemasonry. But, and I'm assuming you're one of those people, correct?
Well, I think, I am a Freemason. I do not see any, I've been involved with it for 18 years. I can only give you my experience in the Blue Lodge and high degree system. I have never seen anything negative involved with it, but I'm not going to come on here and say, it's like anything else in life. Nothing is 100% positive. Nothing is 100% negative. Really only shades of gray. And Freemasonry does have a dark side to it. That's irrefutable. I don't deny that. And, it's definitely had an influence upon my life. And in the book, I try to document its influence on the United States of America. And I think I successfully do that. In fact, I even have a chapter called The United States of Freemasonry, where I present that the United States is really the world's first Masonic republic. So I am very aware of the influence of Freemasonry and the impact it has in this world. Has it all been positive? Of course not. I wouldn't come on here and say, that's always been the case.
Okay, and what about your understanding about the Rothschilds?
Again, this is not anything that I really delve into in my book. This is, again, dealing with international banking and things like that. My books, the Royal Arch of Enoch, is really about the high degree system and this influence and this the importance of this ritual in high degree Freemasonry and how it's really being used to formulate the United States. The Illuminati of Bavaria, of Adam Weishaupt, I talk about in the book. Again, I do not believe this organization, as it was set up back then, exists to this day. And I'm familiar with the Rothschilds. Their connection to Freemasonry, one could argue, is somewhat nebulous and tenuous. So again, that may be a little bit beyond the area of my expertise.
Okay, so you went to Oxford, though, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you? Well, I mean, it seems hard for me to believe that you're quite as naive as you sound in this regard. I mean, are you, because there is now they're almost inseparable. I mean, certainly in studying Freemasonry, you got into the work of Aleister Crowley, for example.
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
Okay. And so you would understand that those rituals, well, for the most part, that's a black magician, at work, right?
I would disagree with that. Crowley viewed himself as a white magician. And whether, I agree with you, there was a very dark side to this man. But, there is a lot surrounding Aleister Crowley and some of the rituals he was performing. He is a Freemason. This has been somewhat debatable because the lodge he joined at the time had a falling out with the Grand Orient of France. But I recognize him as a Freemason. I wouldn't deny his Masonic membership. And, of course, he's much more well-known for these other two groups he's involved with, the Golden Dawn and the OTO.
Right.
But I really think that, to understand Crowley, a lot of his workings are based upon Blue Lodge and high-degree Freemasonry. I think that's really irrefutable.
Okay, but do you think that do you think he was being symbolic when he talked about sacrifice?
Yeah, I mean, Crowley definitely had a tongue-in-cheek side to him.
And I would agree with you, by the way, on that. I'm not completely critical of Crowley. As a matter of fact, I do believe that he was deeper than a lot of people give him credit for. But I also believe that there was a definite dark side to him, and certainly was followed by a lot of people that sort of were, seeing him on the dark side exclusively. So, but if you read, and I have read some of his works, and I do know that he talks about sacrifice, animal sacrifice, just at the very beginning of it. I don't mean to be offensive here, but I think, you sound like you really gotten into this subject, and obviously you've gone up the ranks. But it would seem if you're alive today in the world today, and you are a person who's studying Freemasonry and Masonry, in essence, you would consider yourself a magician, that you have to be aware of. I mean, it would be extremely naive not to be aware of the extreme dark side of Freemasonry and Masons and what's being done with this. And I don't even see how you could avoid being sort of coerced and even recruited to be part of some of these rituals, if you indeed got into it. If you stayed on an intellectual level, that would be just a matter of study, but I don't think you can rise through the ranks at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, without going through some of these things in the real world.
Well, I mean, I'm a 32nd degree Mason, and I haven't seen any of this stuff that is often talked about. I've never seen anything in Masonry that I would call satanic. I've never seen anything within Masonry that I would call Luciferian. I've never seen any sort of sacrifice or anything even close to any of this. And I can only speak to my experience as to what I've seen. I have never been privy to any of this, anything like this.
Okay, now what about this book that came out? Because I think I have to flip through websites, but there is somewhere where you're referred to in reference to Dan Brown and his more popularization of this information, right? In terms of the novels he wrote.
Are you talking about the Dan Brown material?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, what was the question? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
Okay, well, for example, The Lost Symbol. Have you ever read that book?
No, I have not.
Oh, all right. Well, that's interesting because that's where I guess Dan Brown gets a bit more sinister than he was in the first books that he wrote, the one that's more popular, which I'm forgetting the name of it offhand now.
I think you're talking about Da Vinci Code?
Yes.
Yeah, I've never read Lost Symbol, but again, that's, those books are just works of fiction. So,
well, that's maybe a matter of opinion. It is interesting. There is reason to believe that there's perhaps a more covert, I don't know, agenda behind the publishing of those books at this particular time. Certainly, the lost symbol has quite a bit of very interesting resonance. So, okay, well, in terms of your understanding, let's maybe start with that, because you really seem to have, I don't know, you became a lawyer, but you've also seemed to have dedicated yourself to this in a very serious way if you've written these books. So what is it that you were trying to convey?
Right. With the first book, what I would say is the primary thesis of that book, this is the Royal Arch of Enoch book, was, I mean, this does get controversial, was that this Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, it's really sort of, I lay out in the book what's going on in the Blue Lodge as far as the ritual goes, and how this sort of, this story in the Blue Lodge is carried forward in this high degree ceremonial called the Royal Arch of Enoch. And the ritual is coming out of Paris, France in the 1740s, 1750s. It's controversial. You have, you have it incorporating elements of the Book of Enoch, or one Enoch, which shouldn't be happening. According to mainstream history, like I said earlier, the Book of Enoch is lost to Western civilization. But you have with Blue Lodge Freemasonry, this is coming on the scene in England in 1717. You have the high degree system. This is what's called the original high degree system that really birthed the Scottish Rite and influences the York Rite. It's called the Rite of Perfection. It's 25 degrees, comes out of Paris, France in the 1740s, 1750s. This is actually being developed by the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, as part of the Counter-Reformation to undermine Blue Lodge Freemasonry in England. And it's really being developed as a vehicle to restore these Stuart Catholic pretenders back to the throne of England. And it's because of this that these degrees really never take off in London and its environs. The thesis and the point of the book was, number one, was to point out this historical anomaly. And number two was then to go into just what was coming out of this ritual, how it tied into the Blue Lodge, and how it was really symbolically defining Masonry in general, but also this high degree, this Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, being developed, being used to develop and cultivate the United States of America. And you get controversial things with this, where in the ritual, and I'm just plowing over this material a mile a minute. If you want to jump in and interrupt me, you have with you have to really understand what's going on in the two degree systems. Where in the Blue Lodge you have the word of a master mason is possessed by this character called Hiram Abiff. He's building Solomon's temple. The word that he has is the name of God. It's what's commonly referred to as the Tetragrammaton, and it's through the possession of this word that all wisdom is made possible. This comes out of Masonic lore. He's killed. These three assassins want the word. He won't give it to them. He's killed. He's ultimately resurrected in the Blue Lodge ritual. It's very Gnostic. It has a very Gnostic theme to it. And the entire ritual is solar in nature. It's really a retelling of the Osirian cycle in Egypt. But then you fast forward to this high degree ceremony of the Royal Arch. This word that Hiram Abiff had is recovered, and the candidate recovers it, and in doing so becomes this sort of symbolic Enochian, Pythagoras, Hermes Trismegistus character. And it's really in the United States, the way it's being set up originally, it was really the highest degree of Freemasonry. And even in the Scottish Rite, really and even in the York Rite, it's really the end of the Masonic story. A lot of the degrees that come after this ritual take place chronologically before the Royal Arch. So the whole book was this gigantic study on this degree, how it's incorporating these books of Enoch, the Book of Enoch, and how this was influencing material culture in the 21st century and the 19th century, 20th century, 21st century.
Well, then the Book of Enoch has been found, right?
Correct.
It's published. I mean, I have a copy.
Right.
So when you say it was lost, and then you're saying that it's being what would you say is the key then to the Book of Enoch that it brings forward into Freemasonry and what you call these blue degrees, which I see have something to do with what they consider to be perfection.
Right. Well, the Blue Lodge is just the first 3 degrees of Masonry. The idea of perfection, that comes into the Scottish Rite. That's the Lodge of Perfection. That ends with the Royal Arch ceremonial. In the York Rite, this is called exaltation. It's the same thing. It's interchangeable words for the same thing. The Book of Enoch, one Enoch, is off Western civilization. It's lost to Western civilization until essentially 1821. But what my book documents is this high-degree ritual is incorporating components of the Book of Enoch in this high-degree ritual as far back as the 1740s, 1750s. So it's an anomaly is really what's going on. And where the book came from, I've been asked that before. That's an interesting story as well, of potential sources of this lost book. The ritual documents the recovery of this name of God. This comes straight out of the Book of Enoch, where Enoch beholds the Hebrew Kabbalah, which as an emanation of the name of God. And it's through this that he's able to restore the 2 pillars of Enoch. And this has to do with the Book of Enoch and this wisdom that Enoch is given in the Book of Enoch from these series of archangels and watcher, quote-unquote, demon entities. And what Enoch does in the Masonic lore and the ritual, when Enoch gets back down to earth with this wisdom, he catches word that the flood of Noah is coming, and in order to basically trick God and thwart, the flood of Noah, Enoch takes this wisdom that he's learned in the afterlife in the Book of Enoch, conceals it on 2 pillars, buries it in the subterranean vault with this secret name, the secret word of God, and it's through the correct pronunciation of this word in the Masonic lore and ritual that these 2 pillars are restored. So you have this very, symbolic ritual going on, and again, it's probably the premier ritual in Freemasonry.
Okay, but the pillars, in other words, there is controversy as to the idea that the pillars even exist, whether they've been found, and all of this sort of thing, right?
Well, right. It's a symbolic ritual. Whether it's actual real history, that's debatable. I agree with you there. It could be. When you really get into this, and when you really begin to research it, and you really begin to see some of the symbolisms coming out of this ceremonial and who's developing it, you really do begin to question: is this really trying to convey some sort of lost history? It's a fascinating study. I get into it much more in the book. In the ritual, for example, as it exists today, it's generally this subterranean Enochian treasure vault is discovered by temple builders who are constructing the second temple, which is known as the Second Temple of Zorobabel. The first temple is the Temple of Solomon. The second temple that they're building is called the Temple of Zorobabel. That name literally means the path to Babylon. The Jewish governor who is building it is named Zorobabel. He's dispatched by a Persian emperor named Cyrus the Great to reconstruct the second temple. At any rate, in one of the earlier workings of this ritual, this secret treasure vault is discovered by a coterie of Roman Catholic Knights Templar. And this is actually where the Scottish Rite gets its name from. The Scottish Rite is actually French in origin. And it gets its name from this degree, this early working of this thing called the Scotch Master's degree, where this treasure vault is discovered by a coterie of Roman Catholic Knights Templar. At any rate, one begins to wonder, is this ritual trying to convey some sort of lost history? Is this potentially what the Templars found, in their time in the Holy Land, excavating the Temple Mount? It's certainly possible. I can't give you. I wish I could give you a definitive answer for that. But it's a fascinating study, and it's definitely a possibility. It's in play.
Okay. Now, did you pursue all of this to become, in other words, to sort of go on a path to enlightenment, or what you might call perfection? Although I think that's maybe the wrong use of the word. But for whatever purpose. In other words, I understand that you had an intellectual interest, but was it also because you were looking for some kind of spiritual path to enlightenment type of thing?
I guess that's certainly one way, I guess, to look at it. I became, like I said, this has just been a subject matter that sort of always fascinated me, just for whatever reason. And I guess, when I began researching this, and doing the research and this and that, I mean, of course, back in the day, I wasn't as cognizant of this material as I am today. But I guess, when I was researching this and doing the work and reading the books and going through the different materials, and again, like I said, I don't think this book, I don't think either book, in fact, I can state this emphatically, I can tell you that neither book would have been possible but for my Masonic membership. I would not have been able to write either one of these books if I had not become a Masonic Freemason. That I know for certain. But I guess when I went through the degrees, and it's the way it is for a lot of Masons, and it was for me too. When you go through these degrees, you go through somewhat shell shock. I mean, it is sort of a kind of an odd ritual. I joined a fraternity house at Gettysburg, and the rituals actually parallel themselves, to be honest with you. But again, you're not ready for it, and it's you're paraded around the lodge, and you're half naked, and you're blindfolded, and you can't see. But when you step back and then you start reading the works of people like Albert Pike and Manly P. Hall and Albert Mackey, you really get a greater grasp of the idea. I think this is going to answer your question, that these rituals are really containing a lot of deep symbolism and have a lot of ulterior meanings to them. And that really fascinated me. And I guess I just started this quest to write these books. And the Royal Arch of Enoch was the first one, and it literally was 20 years of research. And I took that 20 years and turned it on Hollywood next, which is Cinema Symbolism. And I'm actually writing another book on Freemasonry right now. That's really even going to provide more backstory, just with the history of Freemasonry and its importance within the United States culture.
Okay, so you went through these all these levels, and may I ask if you have had any sort of realizations along the way, and did you have any assistance with, say, opening your third eye and becoming aware of, I'm not sure what they call it, but Kundalini energy, opening the chakras, or chakras, depending on how you want to say it, that sort of thing.
Right. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that. I definitely feel like I had epiphanies along the way. I definitely had your Pythagoras eureka aha moment, I have found it sort of thing, where I was able to understand, and especially with like with the Blue Lodge, I was clearly, able to see through just the research, through writing it, and through going through the ritual, the idea of the Osirian cycle from Egypt, the entire idea of the solar history, and maybe that's not the right word, the solar iconography, that's a better word, that's going on inside the Blue Lodge, the parallels between this solar iconography and what I would even call astrology, astrotheology, within, the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity and Judaism and even Islam. I had a much better understanding of that. And I saw this symbolism even being carried forward, the solar iconography going forward even in this Royal Arch ceremonial. I mean, you even get into the Book of Enoch, where there's an astronomy book, an astrology book where, he's taught, hey, if you want to, be like God, quote unquote, study the sun and the moon and the stars, essentially. So I definitely had along the way epiphany moments, epiphanies and eureka moments, and that definitely happened. And I think I'm better off for it, and it definitely made the writing of this book. I had a much more greater understanding writing this book than I did, say, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And like I said, just joining the temple and seeing the rituals and going through the rituals, definitely I had my aha moments, and I put them in the book, and it's out there for anyone to, like I said, just to sum up real quick, it was definitely being able to not only see this material, but forge links, forge nexuses to things that at first I did not have any clue were Masonic per se. or solar in nature, or were containing esoteric symbolisms that now I have a much greater level of understanding on. So I guess if you want to say, maybe my third eye has been opened, that I'm more symbolically adroit or alert. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's maybe something to that argument.
Okay, well, let's just take your photograph on your website, for example. It looks like you didn't just take any old photograph here. You've got a book in your hand, a certain book, and you've got what appears to be something of a wand in your hand. Is that right? And you're also showing the ring. Is that right?
I assume you were talking about the me where I'm in a black suit sitting down.
Yes.
Okay, it is a cigar in my one hand, and it is I'm wearing a couple rings. I believe in that photo, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe 2 are Masonic and 1 is my family crest or coat of arms.
Okay, and your father, let's see, your Sullivan is the last name, right? So your family line is what we would call loosely Illuminati.
Not to my knowledge. My name is Sullivan. My father is not a Freemason. My grandfather, and I've had grandfathers who were. They are long deceased. But at no time do I now or have ever considered myself to be Illuminati.
Okay.
And again, I would be in 2015. I would be Robert W. Sullivan IV would be highly skeptical of someone identifying themselves as Illuminati in 2015. That's my understanding.
Okay. All right. So, are you aware of the work of Jordan Maxwell?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and you know that he was in touch with Manly P. Hall before his death, and that he also gave him his remaining books and memoirs, so to speak.
Absolutely. I think Manly P. Hall's great. I rely on him heavily. I've read all his books.
Okay. And you don't see a sort of an overall control agenda within the sort of in the overall Masonic tradition.
I'll answer your question this way, and because I've been asked this before, and I don't mind answering it. The way I can best describe it is this: and I'm going to do my best not to dodge your question. When it comes to Freemasonry, a lot of people have been members of it, and a lot of people have been influenced by it, myself included. And I think what is happening is that people such as the Founding Fathers and people like DeWitt Clinton are using the teachings and moralities and lessons and symbols of Freemasonry and using them to craft society. And I believe they are doing this unilaterally because they are so impressed with it. I have never, like I said, I can only speak from my experience. I have never seen or been part of any sort of secret organization, Luciferian, evil, devil-worshipping cabal within Freemasonry. I'll answer your question this way. If it's there, I've never seen it. I'm aware of the works of Manly P. Hall. I know he talks about this, in his books. I mean, I even used the one quote in Royal Arch. And Hall, I think, is great when it comes to symbolism. I know from being a Freemason, Hall does kind of lose a lot of Freemasons when he gets into this. And he is clearly getting this material when he gets into the sort of, this idea of the unknown philosophers and this secret group of unknown philosophers. He is clearly picking that up from Madame Blavatsky. And I don't have a problem with it per se. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. I will answer your question this way. I mean, Freemasonry is very important, and a lot of people have used its teachings to craft the modern world and craft the United States. Could there be potentially a hidden hand in all of this? I think you will find Illuminati footprints and fingerprints at the development of this country. You will find a ton of Masonic icons. Whether it be the Erie Canal, the Statue of Liberty, the Federal District. You'll find it in Baltimore, Maryland. You'll find it in College Seals, California. So this isn't a coincidence. I mean, this is definitely there intentionally. I don't dispute that. What I would say is I don't necessarily see this evil hidden hand behind all this. I think the problem with it is that there was no transparency with any of this. what I mean to say is that, like, say, for example, with the federal district, clearly there are very noticeable Masonic template with the federal district.
Yes.
All the architects who worked on it were Freemasons. I think if in 1791 George Washington had published a treatise of some kind saying, "Hey, listen, I'm a Freemason. We're using Freemasonry. We're using its tools, tenets, to craft this federal district. Here's what we're doing. Have a nice day. Read this at your will." Signed, George Washington, countersigned, Benjamin Banneker, countersigned Benjamin Franklin. My gut feeling is probably 95% of the population probably could have cared less. I think the sentiment would have been, as long as you're not interfering with my livelihood and my family, go right ahead. Unfortunately, this wasn't done. It was done in secret. There was no transparency, and it's viewed as evil. I don't believe the intention behind any of this is evil. In fact, you could actually argue it the other way, that it's very spiritual. It's very divine in nature. I understand the paranoia. I understand the anti-Masonry. I get it. Like I said, I just don't happen to necessarily agree with all of it.
Okay. Now, what about the Templars?
Okay, well, that's very interesting. This week we'll talk about the Templars. They factor into Freemasonry in a unique way. And what happens is, I'm going to have to just go back in time a little bit, just give the listeners just a brief history of Freemasonry here. And what we have going on is we have Blue Lodge Freemasonry. This is Craft Lodge Freemasonry. This is degrees 1, 2, and 3, officially coming on the scene in England in June of 1717. This is when it's officially on the history map. I do not dispute that the Masonic Lodge and Temple existed before this in some form or fashion. This is evident from writings of people like Elias Ashmole, who's an Oxford lawyer, who's flirted with the Rosicrucians, but it officially comes on the scene in 1717. Shortly thereafter, I want to say in 1721, a Presbyterian minister writes something called the Constitutions of the Freemasons. And this book traces the legendary history of the Freemasons all the way back to these biblical stoneworkers who are building things like the Tower of Babel. He hints at Egypt. Then he gets into the Gothic cathedral builders of Europe. And it's this legendary history. Years later, a very interesting character named Andrew Michael the Chevalier Ramsay comes along. He is very interesting. He is a Roman Catholic, English Jacobite, universalist who's living in France. He's a Freemason. He has an honorary degree from Oxford University. And in 1737, he writes this thing called the Oration of Chevalier Ramsay. And what he does is he gives this alternative history to Anderson. And what Ramsay says is, he says, Anderson, I don't necessarily disagree with you on the stone building. Obviously, there's operative Freemasonry. You had the, actual stone cutters incorporating these, components of sacred architecture, Vesica Pisces, golden ratio, yada, yada, yada. I don't dispute that. He said, but the real history of Freemasonry originates with this group called the Knights Templar. He said, Freemasonry is Roman Catholicism. He said, and Freemasonry comes from when the Templars were over in the Holy Lands on the Crusade. They came in contact with these remnants of the mystery tradition, things like the Sufis, Mithraism, Zoroastrianism, Pythagoreanism, the Egyptian mysteries. The Templars came in contact with all this, brought it back to Europe, and incorporated it, and this is where modern-day Freemasonry comes from. So you have, within the high degree, and it's Ramsay's oration of 1737 that really is really the firing shot that births the high degree system. And this is really one of the differences within Freemasonry, where you have in the Blue Lodge, you have themes of democracy and egalitarianism, and equality and brotherhood. When you enter the high degree bodies, you will definitely find elements of apotheosis, becoming divine, papal monarchy, things that sort of run contradictory to the Blue Lodge system. And when you understand that this was being cultivated originally as part of the Counter-Reformation, as sort of a vehicle of the Jesuits to undermine England, which was their modus operandi since the Council of Trent, it begins to make more sense. But you will have this very split between the high degree system and the Blue Lodge. just symbolically and philosophically, where you definitely get into these much more ideas of papal monarchy and Roman Catholicism coming into the high degree system much more than you'll find in the Blue Lodge. And that's the Templar element. That's how the Templars enter all this.
Okay. Well, what about your understanding of Lucifer? What is it that you, how do you characterize this individual?
Right, Lucifer. Sure. When it comes to Lucifer, I'm your Huckleberry. Lucifer comes into Freemasonry from the works of a Freemason named Albert Pike. He is the Manly P. Hall also picks up on this, and I talk about it also. Lucifer, or the Albert Pike, is not the originator of the Scottish Rite. I hear that all the time. Albert Pike is the inventor of the Scottish Rite. Anyone telling you that is 100% false. Albert Pike isn't born until 1809. The Scottish Rite is set up by a man named Frederick Gaucho in 1801, years before Pike's even born. Pike is an odd fellow years before he becomes a Freemason, but he becomes the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite at the outbreak of the American Civil War in 1859. It's a position he holds his entire life until his death in 1891. In 1871, he publishes a book called The Morals and Dogma of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which, if you have read it, has nothing to do with Freemasonry. It's the first book published in the United States about comparative religion. It is a complete ripoff. Most sections of the works of a French transcendentalist magician named Eliphas Levi. Pike quotes him verbatim in some points. And what you have comparatively is Pike comparing the planet Venus to Lucifer. The nexus is that Venus occasionally rises in the east as false light, and this is its connection to Lucifer as a false sort of deity. Venus is a false light. However, Venus or Lucifer, being the light bearer, announces the coming of the true light of the world, the sun, which is which is really what I would call in the Royal, first portion of the Royal Arch. The sun is the most important symbol of Freemasonry. I mean, even the Blue Lodge is set up based on the sun. So really what he's doing is he's using Lucifer as a parallel to the planet Venus, as a herald of the coming light of the world, the sun. I mean, he says it, is it Lucifer that bears the light, doubt it not? I mean, he's absolutely right. If he said, is it Venus that announces the sunrise, doubt it not? I mean, he's right again. It's the same thing. Manly P. Hall uses his iconography a few years later in a book he writes called The Lost Keys of Freemasonry. He talks about the seething energies of Lucifer being in your hands. And once you become a Freemason. And again, what he's really talking about is when you're getting into the Blue Lodge, you're using the sun as the source of light or enlightenment. So what he's talking about is when you join the lodge, the seething energies of wisdom or Luciferianism or solar energy are in your hands, and you do with it as you please. I do not believe in any way, shape, or form any of these men were, and myself included, were referring to Lucifer as some sort of evil demonic entity. It's a parallel to esoteric wisdom and solar energy and solar light, and of course the sun being the light or enlightenment. I mean, is the premier icon within Freemasonry. I mean, in fact, it's the way I opened up the Royal Arch of Enoch book. Lucifer comes into Freemasonry from Albert Pike. I talk about it in the Royal Arch, and you'll find it in Manly P. Hall as well. You go through the Blue Lodge or you go through the high degree system, either in the York Rite or the Scottish Rite, the word Lucifer is not mentioned one time. It's just a symbolic reference in a book referring to the sun and the light of the world. Okay,
now are you aware of the Anunnaki and let's say Sitchin's work, for example?
I am to an extent, but I think I don't want to anticipate your question or put words in your mouth. But I, if it's the whole idea of Enoch going into heaven, and these are not angels, these are competing extraterrestrial races. I'm familiar with it, but it's not something. I don't hold myself out as an expert on this, and it's really not my bailiwick 100%. I don't mind talking about it, but I'm not 100%. I'm not sure I'm the guy you really want to ask about it, but I am familiar with it.
Oh, okay. Well, now, actually, I'm interested from your point of view of what you understand about the Anunnaki and the idea that, that the secret societies and especially possibly Freemasonry were infiltrated at a certain point, and perhaps Albert Pike was the instigator on some level, but it appears to have happened even earlier than that. And I wonder if you appreciate sort of some of the references that may be referring to so-called God that aren't really talking about the creator per se, but talking about an Anunnaki in person.
Well, within Freemasonry, I would say I don't know if I'd go so far as to call it an infiltration. I guess you could when you get into the high degree system. The original high degree, the intent was to destroy England. It's like I said, it's being cultivated by the Society of Jesus to put the Stuart pretenders back on the throne of England. That's really part of the modus operandi of the high degrees. Once all notions of Stuart restoration or Stuart Catholic restoration had passed, the high degrees, begin to flourish. And of course, in the United States, France was our chief ally, so it's really no surprise that the French degree system really takes off here. When you get into Freemasonry and deity, Blue Lodge Freemasonry is deism in a nutshell. Meaning, in order to join, you have to believe in a creator God or a supreme being. They do not, you can be Christian, you can be Muslim, you can be Hindu, you can be Buddhist, you can be Jewish. What you can't be is really atheist or agnostic. Those are really the two no-nos that you're not supposed to be. You can't have that. The idea of what this God is to you is left to the individual Mason. I would say that this entity in Freemasonry is the term that's generally given is Great Architect of the Universe. This is just the title assigned to God. Also, the Grand Geometrician. You'll hear that from time to time. It's a supreme being. How you get there personally is sort of left up to you. I would say I wouldn't go so far as to say some sort of an Anunnaki reference, and I don't know if that's really salient or anything like that. I would say where this can get controversial is when you get into the idea, and it's not really with deity per se. But you get into the whole idea of this royal, and this is what's gotten me in trouble. Most Freemasons who have read the book love it, but there are some that don't. Of course, I'm not above criticism. The knock on the book is, and what is not liked is the idea that this Royal Arch ceremonial, the idea that the wisdom that is restored is coming from this idea. It's coming from a group of fallen angels or watchers.
Right.
So you have in Freemasonry technically, you have Freemasons being sort of the preservers of antediluvian quote unquote demonic wisdom that God was trying to eradicate with the flood of Noah. That's gotten me into a little bit of trouble, not too much. If you read the Old Testament, the wisdom is considered evil. This is what God is trying to eradicate with the flood. In the Book of Enoch, despite the wisdom coming from these deities, these entities, the wisdom is still considered divine. So it's almost, this is going to sound very oxymoronic, it's almost sort of the divine origins of evil, if that makes any sense. But you have the idea of Freemasons being the preservers of this sort of lost, antediluvian wisdom. And this is part of the crux of anti-Masonry, that Masons are the protectors of wisdom that God was trying to eradicate with the flood of Noah. And I talk about this much more in the book, but I would say, that would be definitely a controversial aspect of the Royal Arch of Enoch book. And probably has been, when it comes within and other Freemasons, I guess that would probably be the criticism that has been laid against me more than any other.
Okay. Now, in terms of your own family history, you say you don't have any Illuminati in your family line as far as you know. Is that correct?
Yeah, I hope not.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I
appreciate that, but I'm just curious, have you investigated your family line?
Well, I've taken it back, not back to the beginning of time. I've taken it back to a certain extent, not that far, but I mean, I can tell you as I sit here, my father is not a Freemason. My grandfather, this is on my father's side. My grandfather, Robert W. Sullivan Jr., was a Freemason. And was what was called a past master. That's someone who ruled over a Masonic lodge for a year. That's called a worshipful master. When the worshipful master steps down, he's called a past master. His wife, her father. So this would have been my great grandfather or my grandmother. He was also a Freemason. He was also a past master. So I've had some relatives who have been, involved with Masonic rulership. Leading Masonic lodges and things like that. I mentioned in the book, I give a brief history of this in the book, in Royal Arch of Enoch. But no, as far as I can tell, no one in my family has been in the Illuminati, and I have never traced my family back to colonial era or anything like that. But to my knowledge, no one in my family has been a member of the Illuminati.
Okay. Thank you, and I just want to say that I really appreciate all your sort of sincerity in answering my questions. I know I'm sort of jumping all over the place here, but I think that we're going to have a very a varied audience, I guess you might say, and some will have knowledge of these areas and some will have none. So I'm sort of trying to link a few things that sort of stay separate normally maybe in people's minds, and try to weave a connecting through line in using my questions to do so. So I do have some method to my madness here. What I want to know, and I do want to get into symbolism in cinema.
If anything you want to.
Yeah, and I worked in that area in Hollywood for 20 years, so I have some background there. But I also would like to first ask you, in terms of Freemasons, and you haven't gone back into your family line. I assume you've been looking at the symbolism within Washington, D.C., for example, right?
Yes, I have a whole chapter on it.
Okay. And so you know what these symbols mean, but do you understand what they mean energetically? Are you aware of things like ley lines and that sort of energies?
Yes, I am. I am familiar with that, and I do believe. I do not dispute really what you're saying. I mean, I do believe that the incorporation. I think this is what you're sort of asking me. I think this goes back to some of the origins of where this comes from. The idea of incorporating this arcana. It definitely has an esoteric impact, and I think it is symbolically important, and there is energy surrounding it. I mean, I do think there is something to that. I don't think if it was the case, I don't think it would be as prevalent as it is. And I do believe that the incorporation of this material is very powerful, and it is trying to convey powerful imagery.
Okay, but what about as a control mechanism?
No, I don't necessarily see it as a control mechanism. The idea of incorporating alignments to stars and dropping a cornerstone on a certain date, and using Masonic symbols, and doing alignments to different constellations and things of that nature. It's a form of Christian mysticism. It's Christian Kabbalah is what it really is. It's Kabbalah spelled with a C instead of a K. And this comes out of the works of a man named Raymond Lully, who was a medieval Renaissance Kabbalist. And what he talked about was incorporating these symbols, these astrological icons into buildings and symbols and alignments. You're turning the building into a forever memory temple. And this is picked up on. You also find this in the works of people like Giordano Bruno. And the idea is by doing this, the motivation is that by by aligning the building to certain stars and things of this nature and the symbolism. Since the stars are closer to God in heaven, you're symbolically drawing down divinity onto earth. And you're tapping into the spirituality of that particular star system or constellation or planet or something to that effect.
Well, isn't there a predominance of focus, correct me if I'm wrong again, but on Orion?
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because within the Blue Lodge ritual, you will actually the constellation Orion was in the Egyptian pantheon was Osiris, and the virgin consort is Sirius, which is Isis, and this plays a huge role. What you just mentioned in the ritual, the third degree ritual of the Blue Lodge of Freemasonry. This is the third degree Master Mason ritual, which, for lack of a better word, is a retelling of the Osirian cycle, where the candidate plays Hiram Abiff. Hiram Abiff is just a solar icon, and is really just a retelling. It's just another name to give to Osiris, and you will find references to the Virgin Mother, Isis, as well within the Blue Lodge. Albert Pike talks about the blazing star of Freemasonry being Sirius. This is of course a reference to Isis. This in Freemasonry is what's called is the pentagram, and this is symbolized in Freemasonry in the Blue Lodge as a pentagram, Sirius, and this is why the candidate, when he's resurrected from the dead, as Osiris is brought back to life on the 5 points of fellowship, and of course 5 points form a pentagram, and the candidate has the substitute word whispered in his ear. It's not the real word of God; it's a substitute word. The word is lost when Hiram dies. And this is a complete parallel to Isis, who possessed this secret word, the secret name of Amun-Ra, which he used to resurrect Osiris to sire Horus. So you'll find this very deep Egyptian parallel, and you get this idea of the candidate being this now that Osiris is dead, his solar replacement is Horus, who is the solar replacement for Osiris, and of course he's the son, he's the child of Isis, who is now widowed. I'm sure you've heard the term "son of the widow," the widow's son. Freemasons are son of the widow. That's the widow they're referring to, is Isis, who is the widow of who is widowed upon the death of Osiris. And symbolically, on a symbolic level, all Freemasons are symbolically Horus, or Hori, the son of Isis. And of course, Horus is a solar deity. And of course, since Isis only birthed the sun, which is masculine, Isis never births the moon, which is feminine. This is why only men can become Freemasons. So you will find this, astrological story being told in the Blue Lodge. And yeah, I mean, within Freemasonry, I mean, within architecture, you will find alignments to Sirius and things of that nature.
Okay, and I take it you aren't aware of the symbolism that had to do with the Anunnaki, the return of Horus, basically said to be the return of Marduk. Are you familiar with that link up? And also in terms of what there was I guess a lot of a secret society sort of surrounding all of this that certainly involves Masons, or a portion of the Masons, having to do with the return of basically the New World Order, the rising sun, and Horus being the rising sun, therefore being synonymous with Marduk, the son of Enki, and considered to be the New World Order. Have you heard these link-ups?
Well, you have definitely parallels within the Egyptian and the Babylonian, and of course you have a Babylonian intrusion into Freemasonry, like I mentioned earlier, with the Second Temple being rebuilt, which is, I'm writing another book on Freemasonry right now called Freemasonry and the Path to Babylon, which gets more into what you're talking about, which I get more into the Egyptian in Royal Arch. But I would say regarding a New World Order, it's something I talk about in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. And really what it is, in my opinion at any rate, the idea of a new world order is just that, the United States of America. The United States was a complete departure from the old world order, which was European monarchy and Vatican rule. So to me, the new world order really is the United States of America. That's my take on it in the book.
Okay, but the United States of America was already formed, long formed, actually, when George Bush Sr. referred to the New World Order.
I'm sorry, when what was
George Bush Sr.
Right.
made a famous statement referring to the New World Order.
Right. I mean, this is This is like is George Bush talking about a new world order, a one world government, things like that.
Right.
I can't. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball in front of me. I can't tell you whether or not that's coming down the pike or anything like that. But my take on a new world order is really the United States of America. I guess you could craft an argument that as far as a one world government is concerned. I guess you could kind of maybe draw a parallel and say something to the effect of this could be if we're leaving the age, if astrologically we're leaving the age of Pisces right now, we're heading to the age of Aquarius, and you have the idea of Aquarius being this very egalitarian, society, sort of embracing the principles of Freemasonry. However, if you wanted to say there was a dark side to this, I guess Aquarius's dark side would be that its polar opposite house is Leo, which is ruled by the sun. So you could kind of create maybe an argument that in 150 years, the Aquarian age will birth a one-world government. That's certainly possible. Whether that happens or not, I don't think I'll be around to see it. But it's definitely possible. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me. But,
well, I mean, you don't really need a
possible.
crystal ball to hear about the Patriot Act. I mean, you do live in this century, right? So you're aware of the encroachment on our personal freedoms, are you not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of the Patriot Act. I would say, me personally, my life hasn't really changed too much prior to that act being passed. And I don't. And as far as the Patriot Act is concerned, I mean, I understand that we have all the cybersecurity issues and things like that. I do not see any necessarily nexus between that and Freemasonry. But yes, I mean, I am fully aware of, that we have, now the, NS, whatever it is that at Fort Meade, the NSA is listening on in our emails and things like that.
Right.
But if they want to follow me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter, they can go right ahead. I don't think I'm doing anything that I'm not worried about it. I mean,
okay. Well, I
haven't had any Men in Black yet show up on my doorstep. So when that happens, that my opinion will drastically change.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think your awareness of maybe the implications of what you're talking about will have to change first before that's going to happen. But let's make that transition now to basically the symbolism in Hollywood and why you were interested to write a book about that.
Yeah, absolutely. This was something that I was seeing when I was writing Royal Arch. When I was doing the final chapter of Royal Arch of Enoch, I was seeing sort of these Masonic solar, storylines, these veiled, thieves going on in movies. I knew previously about George Lucas with the Joseph Campbell monomyth, but it was really, when I was doing Royal Arch, for example, I mean, this is something I take on in the final chapter, the National Treasure movie with Nicolas Cage. I mean, that has some very overt Masonic overtones in it, but that movie is a Masonic ritual. If you want to see the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial played out on your on TV on your high def television, throw in National Treasure. I mean, that's the Royal Arch of Enoch ritual.
Okay, can you explain that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, please, can you explain that in more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. The Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, the ritual, the high degree ritual. This is the 13th in the Scottish Rite. This is the 7th in New York Rite. They're building it's the recovery, it's the discovery of the Masonic treasure vault beneath the Holy Ground. The Jews have returned from Persia to build the Second Temple. Solomon's Temple's been destroyed. They're clearing the rubble out of the way, and a key stone is found in the ground and a trapdoor is sprung, and the sunlight penetrates this trapdoor, and this secret underground treasure vault is discovered with in it, namely the Pillars of Enoch and this lost word of a master mason, this name of God. Well, this is the exact National Treasure movie. I mean, it's the recovery of the treasure of Freemasonry in a subterranean vault beneath the Holy Ground. You know, that's exactly what the movie is. It's a Masonic ritual. You have it in the in the movie. The Holy Ground, the church, is in New York, which is a clear reference to a man named DeWitt Clinton, who is really, after the death of Washington, the real progenitor of transforming the United States into a Masonic republic. I mean, this is why New York is the Empire State. I mean, it's the Masonic Empire. You have the Erie Canal, which is a Masonic icon. Union College, Schenectady, New York, is a Masonic icon. DeWitt Clinton was one of the early Royal Arch Grand Masters. You have the cultivation of the York Rite in New York. So to put the placement of the Holy Ground in New York City, I thought was very interesting. So really, if you want to watch a Masonic ritual in cinema, it's the first National Treasure movie. National Treasure 2 also has some very veiled Masonic references in it as well. For example, and you just jump in if you want to cut me off or anything. In part 2, you know, and again, this ties into the Da Vinci Code also, the Da Vinci Code movie, where in National Treasure Part 2, you have the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, which again, is the recovery of this treasure. It's the restoration of all this antediluvian wisdom. The candidate possesses the name of God and becomes a symbolic restorer of the Pillars of Enoch and the wisdom contained thereon, which is the 7 liberal arts and sciences and mathematics. So in National Treasure 2, when they need wisdom, well, where do they turn? Well, they turn to chapter 13 in Riley's book for wisdom. And again, this is referencing this 13th degree. It's the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite. It was the original 13th degree in the Rite of Perfection. You will find this ad nauseum in the Da Vinci Code movie. This is the one with Tom Hanks, where every time they need wisdom or a clue, the number 13 comes up on the screen. I remember the Mona Lisa is kept in Hall 13. The time when the keystone is in the back. My goodness gracious! I mean, you're talking about a Royal Arch symbol, a keystone. Without a keystone, you can't have an archway. This is when it's in the back of the van and they're leaving the Swiss vault. He says to the guy, he says, "Oh, you're wearing a Rolex. Why is a security guard wearing a Rolex?" And they flash to it real quick. The time on the Rolex is 1:12. 1 plus 12 is 13. So you'll find this in the Da Vinci Code as well. And this impressed me. And I was seeing enough of it that as a lawyer, you know, I live by the maxim of when in doubt, throw it out. And as a lawyer, I was seeing enough of this that I was completely convinced this was intentional and was going on. And I really wanted to bring Royal Arch of Enoch up to the 21st century. And I completed the book. I ended the book on this, you know, on these talking about some of this Masonic and Enochian and what I would call solar symbolisms in movie. And I really liked it, and I continued on. I wrote Cinema Symbolism, which, like I said earlier, was a continuation. Hang on, I just got to get a drink of water real quick.
No problem.
No, here we go.
And I would be interested if you looked into the movies of Spielberg in this regard.
Some and not all. If it's a movie that I haven't seen, I will be the first to tell you. I get asked all the time about movies I haven't seen, and I would not, you know, mumble through a movie and try to analyze a movie I haven't seen. So I'd have to hear what movie it is. But just to wrap up what you were originally asking me, I was very impressed with this, and I wrote Cinema Symbolism 2, which just got into more mythology, numerology, astrology, archetypes, tarot embodiment going on in these popular movies. And there's even more movies I'm talking about. I'm actually writing Cinema Symbolism 2 right now. I'm doing this concurrently with this book on this other book on Freemasonry I'm writing. When I was doing Cinema Symbolism, I wanted to get into the Harry Potter material and the C.S. Lewis material. It was too daunting. It was too much. The book would never have ended. So I excised that out, and I'm doing Cinema Symbolism 2. But Cinema Symbolism 1 is out right now.
Okay. So are you able to take any of the, in other words, which Spielberg movie did you study and would you be able to talk about?
Well, give me, I mean, like are we talking about like as a producer, a director? I mean, I'll just give you the movies that I go over in cinema symbolism. Might save some time. I do The Exorcist. I do the Omen trilogy. I do some of the Egyptian symbolism and some of the numerology of Back to the Future. The James Bond material, which is all Aleister Crowley. What's some of the other ones I do? A Wizard of Oz, which is very Gnostic and secret society. L. Frank Baum, who wrote that, was in Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy movement, and you have a lot of political allegories going on in that. Black Swan, very alchemical, some unique numerological reference in that as well. That's just some right off the bat. There are others I talk about just in general, horror movies. Dracula, which has some very deeper meanings to it. Frankenstein monster, which is Hebrew Kabbalah.
Okay, and in terms of Dracula having deeper meanings, what deeper meanings are you referring to?
Well, with Dracula, Bram Stoker it was a member of. I mean, you get into the whole Vlad the Impaler thing, and Dracula being this, this somewhat is well known, and Dracula being the symbol for the transmission of disease and the exchange of bodily fluids. That's somewhat well known. Bram Stoker was a member of a secret society called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And what you have going on with Dracula is you have this deep undercurrent going on of this idea of, and this ties into Blavatsky's Theosophy, which was very popular at the time at the writing and publishing of Dracula. You have the entire idea of Eastern mysticism intruding on Victorian Christianity. That's really the underlying theme going on in Dracula. It's very subtle, but you have Dracula as this emblem of Eastern mysticism, and of course Blavatsky was from Russia, and you have this. It's the idea of theosophy intruding and attacking Victorian values and ethics and Christianity. You have that very deep seated level going on inside of Dracula.
Oh, okay. What about just the notion, pure and simple, of power over others through the drinking of blood?
Well, right. I mean, with the vampire, this ties into the thing, of the exchange of bodily fluid. It was rumored that Stoker had syphilis, and he was angry about it. So you have, Dracula, transforming the people, the English Victorian Christians, into vampires and making them, part of his little coterie. And it's really, the idea behind it is it's the attack of East, to me at any rate. It was the idea was what I think Stoker was trying to convey, and he does this very well. Again, it's Eastern mysticism coming into and intruding on Victorian Christianity and Victorian values.
Okay, what about Indiana Jones? Did you look at those movies?
Yeah, I mean, the Indiana Jones movie is kind of unique in that it's not one that I took on in cinema symbolism, but I found it unique in that, and someone else was asking me about this not too long ago. The idea of the Ark of the Covenant being placed in Egypt, I thought that was kind of unique by Spielberg. That and Lucas, I think Lucas also was involved with that movie. The idea of the Ark of the Covenant. Which is critical, and believe it or not, is actually in part of the Royal Arch ceremonial in New York. Right, the lost word of a Master Mason is actually on top of the Ark of the Covenant. But you had the Ark of the Covenant in Egypt, and I couldn't help but start to speculate on this. That maybe there's this whole theory of thought, and I get into it in the Royal Arch of Enoch, and I get into it in cinema symbolism with the whole Judaic Christianity origins being Egyptian in nature. And in fact, that the Judaic Christianity is just a parallel of the ancient Egyptian religion. And I thought that could have been a very unique esoteric homage by Lucas and Spielberg by putting the Ark in Egypt as this premier icon of the Jewish religion, as maybe an esoteric reference to Christianity and Judaism's true Egyptian roots.
Have you ever heard of the Ark of the Covenant being referred to as actually a portal?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Say again, please.
Have you ever heard of the Ark of the Covenant ever being referred to as a portal?
Well, not necessarily. I know in the movie they open it and all hell breaks loose. But in traditional history, it's allegedly the contents. The contents are the smashed tablets and Moses' staff. Whether the thing even actually existed, that's even debatable as well. Certainly, yeah, I mean, you could definitely craft an argument that it's a portal, and I mean that was part of it in the movie, wasn't it? He wanted to use it to try to communicate to God. Certainly possible.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me see. Now, I know we've been going for about almost a little under like an hour and a half or so, and I do have some people in the chat with questions. So I will encourage the people who are listening live to put their questions in the chat, and I will see if I can ask them. Do you mind taking questions from the chat?
I have no problem with it whatsoever.
Okay, great. Actually, I wanted to ask you about one last movie before I do that, which I'm trying to remember the name of it. It has to do with it's shot in England, and gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of it. But I guess I'll have to go to the questions, and then maybe it'll occur to me. But it's a very recent movie, and I just want. So, do you go to movies often? Do you see the updated movies and so on?
Yeah, I go to the movies occasionally. I'm much more a fan of home entertainment. I have a Blu-ray player here and a huge TV screen. That's how I do most of my movie viewing, and certainly when I'm analyzing these movies, I can tell you, Carrie, that it's more than one viewing, and it is constantly pausing it, going backwards, forwards, making notes. Things that happened at the end can refer very subtly to something at the beginning, and it definitely takes me more than one viewing. If I go to see the movie in the theater, I'm usually just watching it for an enjoyment. If I'm analyzing it, I gotta have a legal pad in front of me and put it on Blu-ray or DVD or something and pause it, go back, and even when I'm writing this, I'll be writing it thinking, wait a minute, did this person say this correctly, or am I, do I remember this correct? So I have to go back, throw the movie in, and start watching that scene again or something like that. So it's just for what it's worth, it takes me more than one viewing. But yeah, I do most of my movie. I like going to the movies, but I do most of the analytical part on my Blu-ray player and my flat screen.
Okay, so have you been analyzing any recent movies?
It depends on how you define recent. 21st century, sure. Recent, 10, 15 years, sure. Something that may have come out last week, maybe not. I haven't seen it yet. But I try to keep up, and I try to keep it timely. I'm doing the Hobbit movies in this new cinema book. So I've seen the first two of those. I haven't seen the third one yet. I did all the Lord of the Rings material in Cinema Symbolism 1. So yeah, I mean, I watch recent movies. I try to incorporate them if I find something. But again, I would have to see the movie in full and watch it several times to be convinced that perhaps this is conveying something more than meets the eye.
Okay. What about the James Bond movies? So it appears that I'm not sure if this is correct. And actually, the movie I was looking for was Kingsman: The Secret Service. Have you looked at that?
I know what movie you're talking about. I have not seen it.
Okay. Well, it would be very interesting to hear your take on some of the symbolism in that movie. But since you haven't seen it, in terms of the James Bond movies, your worldview seems to exclude sort of a darker agenda on the part of people who are Freemasons and are Masons and members of secret societies, it seems. Would that be accurate?
No, I'm aware of it. I don't exclude it. I just don't buy into every person coming along saying they're Illuminati and this and that and reptile people and this and that. If I see hard evidence of it, I talk about it, and I've got to do research on it, and I'm certainly aware of it.
Okay.
But like I said,
Well, the reason I asked that question is because I wanted to ask you about the James Bond movies and whether or not the symbolism that you see within the James Bond movies indicates any particular sort of revealing aspect that Ian Fleming might have been trying to tell the public using that symbolism.
Oh, sure, sure. Ian Fleming was during World War II, worked in British counterintelligence, and one of the people that worked for him was Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, his whole life, was a double agent for the British Crown. And this is why Crowley is so hard to pin down, because you don't know what's an act and what isn't. And Fleming, I mean, there's all kind of tales with Fleming and Crowley. Crowley wanted to interview Rudolf Hess. When Rudolf Hess flew to Scotland on the botched peace effort, Crowley went to Fleming and wanted to perform Goetia magic in front of him and said, hey, let me conjure some demons in front of this guy. We'll scare this guy and get him to talk about the Nazis, fascination with astrology, and maybe we'll figure something out. Fleming was very impressed with this idea. And went to Churchill with it and was put down. It was vetoed. But you get into this again with Crowley, and you get into this whole dark thing with this. I mean, Crowley, used to throw these dinner parties. I'll get to the James Bond in a minute, but this is really fascinating. This is coming out more and more. I mean, it's just fascinating. Crowley used to throw these dinner parties for people, and what he would do is he would cook these really hot Indian foods like curries and vindaloos. And he would spike it with mescaline and psychotronic drugs, LSD. And this has always been written off as Crowley being Crowley, and this is the Great Beast being the Great Beast being 666, and Crowley's shenanigans and this and that. It turns out that Crowley was actually being put up to this and was recording the reactions of these people and was recording the reactions of an unsuspecting dinner crowd on psychotronic drugs. And the person that actually seems to be behind this was none other than a Freemason named Winston Churchill. So, I mean, if we're going to get into the dark side of things, I mean, there is part of it for you. I mean, and again, another thing is when Crowley was in America, the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, who was a high-ranking Freemason, refused to investigate Crowley. I mean, you had Crowley doing all this espionage activity for the British. I mean, he claimed to be working for the Germans, but he was actually working for the British. And Crowley, of course, was bisexual. And Hoover actually refused to investigate Crowley. And the theory is that Hoover was going to be outed by Crowley as a closet homosexual. So you had Hoover, you want to get into the dark side of Freemasonry, look no further than J. Edgar Hoover. I mean, this was a guy who was in the Scottish Rite. I mean, let's be brutally honest. I mean, this guy's, record on civil rights is dubious at best. So, I mean, I'm very, very cognizant of all this. Getting back to Fleming and Crowley, I mean, Fleming was heavily influenced by the occult via Crowley. I mean, you have another guy involved in this circle named Dennis Wheatley, who was also involved with counterintelligence during the war. Wheatley wrote a novel called The Devil Rides Out, and in this, there's a black magician in this named Mokata. And there's a movie made by it. Hammer Studios makes a movie with this, starring Christopher Lee and Charles Gray. Charles Gray plays the Mokata character. And it's clearly Crowley. I mean, it's without question. Years later, Ira Levin in Rosemary's Baby actually pays homage to Wheatley. He names the black magician in Rosemary's Baby Mercado. It's the same name phonetically. It's Mokata, Mercado. So you have that going on. So with Fleming, with Crowley, you have this whole thing with James Bond, with the 007 being the reference to John Dee. This is the sigil that Dee used to sign his signature to espionage correspondences to Queen Elizabeth I. It was two two circles with a line over and down. It was supposed to symbolize eyeglasses. It's 007. Meaning he was her eyes in the field of this correspondence. Correspondence was for her eyes only. And then within James Bond, a lot of the Bond stories are based on Fleming's work in the war. But you have very alchemical and occult themes going on in these stories. I mean, you have the Illuminist Blofeld who wants to take over the world. You have the guy who wants to perfect alchemy, Goldfinger. I mean, his first name, Art. AU is the chemical or alchemical symbol for gold. He has the symbolic Philosopher's Stone, which is the nuclear dirty bomb that he's going to detonate in Fort Knox and transmute the gold to be worthless, thereby making his gold worth more. You've got the dragon, Hugo Drax. Then you've got Bond, who gets the piece of wisdom from the Hermes Trismegistus wizard, which is always the miraculous gadget that winds up saving his life. Bond, of course, encounters the evil villain, can't defeat him until he has the This is what the Rosicrucians call the alchemical wedding of the sun and moon. He always has to hook up with the Bond girl. Then he's equipped spiritually to go on and defeat the villain. I mean, it's the same story over and over again. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, you really have a lot going on in the occult world of Ian Fleming, influence.
Hello? 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 Okay. Never fails when we talk about James Bond that we get cut off, as people will know when I've talked to Mike Sparks, who's something of an expert on those stories as well. Well, let me try to get him back on the phone. Hold on. I believe I'm still online.
Yeah, it looks like the Men in Black got me.
That's right. Well, the minute you start talking about Ian Fleming and James Bond, then they seem to want to interfere. I've got another witness, Mike Sparks, who talks about these stories and the link-ups. I'm just looking in the chat to see if there's anything here, and I want to make sure that if someone could type into the chat that you can still hear us and that we are still live now, that I've called Robert back. If you could just let me know that you can hear us and that we are still live. Okay, so it looks like that's okay. So in terms of Ian Fleming, James Bond, all of those stories, do you take anything with you? Because, I can't help but feel that if you have this kind of knowledge that's, you're writing books, that there's a certain level of responsibility in light of what's really going on planet Earth, and that this information and this knowledge is being used in a very dark way, devious way. And so I'm wondering, how it is that you sort of, how do you sleep at night? How do you figure that knowing this information intellectually and yet knowing that there's a great portion of, say, the ruling class, if you will, that, and maybe you just don't agree with this, so that's basically it's sort of more a denial that allows you to kind of have an ease of mind. But in essence, is there no responsibility involved in what you're doing? And with this level of responsibility, because knowledge brings with it responsibility, are you sort of only seeing this as something for yourself? Are you disclosing information because you feel that if you disclose this side of it, that you will help people understand it? I mean, what know what I'm saying here?
I think so. I sleep very well at night. I wrote the book. It was 20 years of my life. I don't think people have asked me, how can you write a book about exposing all this, and don't you get in trouble with the Freemasons? No, I mean, you can write books about the history of Freemasonry, its symbols, its symbolic interpretation. The only thing they frown upon is they don't want you talking about the passwords and passcripts, things like that, tokens of recognitions of what they're called. So, I mean, I was very happy with the way the book came out. I wanted to share this information that I was finding out. I sleep very well at night. I don't dispute that there can be a dark side to this. I think there can also be a light side to it. And certainly dissemination of wisdom, I think, is always a good thing.
Okay.
And it's the same thing with the movies. I mean, I'm fascinated by history, both light and dark. I don't censor it. I take it all together. And I think, I guess for me personally, just being involved in Freemasonry for 18 years, I understand the skepticism. I understand the knocks against it. I really do. I just don't see this overarching sinister hand involved with it. Certainly, people have used it for dark purposes. People who have been Freemasons have been pedophiles, have been evil people. Mm-hmm. I do not dispute this. And I mean, when you have a group with 6 million people, bad apples are going to get involved with this. This is irrefutable. You would find this with any group under the sun. And it's the same thing with the movies. when I was doing this, I was just fascinated by what I was seeing on the screen. I just couldn't believe that these movies and some of the lengths these directors and producers would go to incorporate this stuff. You know, and it's like playing, for me personally, I mean, I don't know if it's the answer you're looking for, but when I watch a movie and I begin to pick up on this stuff, for me, and this is the way I've answered this question before, it's really like, for me, playing a game of symbolic chess against Bobby Fischer. I feel like I'm being challenged by these guys. And I'd really like to try to decode their movies and break them down and find out if it's alchemical or if it's mythological, if it's numerological. But even doing this, I mean, I don't necessarily, you know, ascribe, you know, just because something's incorporated, it's encoded, and it's somewhat being kept secret, I just don't necessarily, you know, unilaterally ascribe a sinister motive behind it. There can be, of course, but you know, I think some of it's very beautiful and sublime, personally.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Have you ever heard that from anyone that Crowley may still be alive?
No, that's a new one on me. I mean, if he's alive, he's going to be up there. I mean, my understanding is he died in 1946, 47, around the age of 75. I have no knowledge that Crowley is still alive. I mean, my goodness gracious, he'd be, I don't know how old he'd be at this point in time.
Okay, well, you're not aware of that the Nazis might have perfected reverse aging?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. And have you studied things like the Fourth Reich? Are you aware of Jim Marrs, for example?
Yes, I know who Jim Marrs is. I have several of his books on the Kennedy assassination, and I am familiar with some of the interest in Nazi Germany, in the occult and mysticism, and things of that nature.
Okay, but have you ever gone down that road in terms of study?
I mean, I've studied. I guess have I studied the Nazi fascination with the occult and mysticism? My answer to that is yes, I have.
Oh, you have? Okay. Are you aware of the works of Joseph Farrell?
That name does not ring a bell to me.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you studied, you know, the Nazi sort of preoccupation with the occult, what do you make of it?
Oh, I think that they were, especially people like Himmler, and you know, some of the hierarchy weren't so much as interested, but clearly Hitler was interested in this. Himmler was probably the main driving force with it. Yeah, I mean, and they definitely seem to have somewhat twisted the teachings of Madame Blavatsky around to fit this Aryan ideology that there was this master race. This comes clearly out of the world of Blavatsky. I don't think it was what Blavatsky intended. I know she's controversial, but I can't imagine she ever imagined what the Nazis did to it. I mean, a lot of her works were twisted by German occultists like von Liszt, von Liebenfelds, people like that. And then you had Goebbels, who was really into Nostradamus, things like that. So yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of the, you know, the whole SS thing with the skull and crossbones, that's very occult in nature. The whole black, you know, uniform. Himmler was basing the Black Order, the SS, on the occult and the, you know, some say the Jesuits. So I mean, you know, they're going around looking for the holy relics, the Grail and the Spear of Longinus and things like that. So yeah, I have never written a book on it. I don't hold myself out as an expert on it, but I'm familiar with it.
Okay. What about in your own practice? Because, you know, I actually, you know, I wouldn't know exactly what you guys do, but based on the work of Crowley, the idea of conjuring a demon, for example, to do your will, do you get involved in doing something like that?
I have never performed magic of that sort. I know I've studied it. I have researched it very extensively. Me personally, I have never attempted to conjure a demon, and I wouldn't recommend it based upon what I have read. I know Crowley was into it, and I am very familiar. I have researched this extensively, but, you know, it's not something I've ever done.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that kind of covers it, at least for the moment, all the questions I can think of. And I do see a couple questions in the chat, but I think we've already answered them, so I hesitate to ask them again. Someone is asking, you know, do you need permission from them to write the well, you didn't really write the Enoch book, but I guess what they mean is to write the book you wrote. And you kind of just answered that, but do you want to elaborate on that? Did you get any kind of permissions whatsoever?
Right. No, I'll go over it. No, I did not get any permission whatsoever. When you join, the truth of the matter, Terry, in 2015, these rituals, the monitors that contain these rituals are online. You could find this with a simple Google search. I'm sure Duncan's Masonic monitors online. So you could find this stuff out, these passwords, these scripts, things like this. I mean, I would even go so far as to say this is all public domain at this point in time. But when you join a Blue Lodge and you go through the rituals, you take an oath, and you promise not to divulge, what's going on in the ritual, the passwords and the pass scripts. You've had Masonic writers such as Albert Mackey say, look, we need books on Freemasonry. It's okay to write about the ritual. It's okay to write about the symbolic interpretation. It's okay to write about the philosophical symbolic interpretations and the history and yada, yada, yada. What is frowned upon is they don't want you giving away like the passwords and the handshakes, things like that. These are called tokens of recognition. That's frowned upon in Masonry. So when I wrote the book, I did not mention any of the passwords or the handshakes. There are a couple times when I have to mention the substitute Word of God and the Word of God, which is recovered in the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, which is completely ceremonial. It's not the real name of God. It's just used for ceremonial purposes. But I didn't write it down. I just used the initials. That's as close as I got. But again, this material in 2015 could be routinely found online. But just because of my Masonic oath, I did not divulge it in the book. But I do get into the symbolic interpretations of the ritual and the histories and the philosophies and things like that.
Okay. Let's see. Someone's asking, are Enoch's pillars the pyramids?
No, not that I don't think so. I somewhat heard this before. The pillars of Enoch are two pillars that he inscribed sacred wisdom on. And this is at least in the Masonic tradition, that he inscribes this wisdom on, that he gleans from these interactions with archangels and watchers from his journey in the afterlife. One pillar it contains the liberal arts and sciences, and the other pillar contains mathematics. In the Royal Arch, I guess you would call underlying history of it. In the ritual, this treasure vault containing the pillars and the sacred word is discovered by temple builders. In the underlying philosophy, the vault has already been penetrated by two people. The first person is a Hellenistic wizard known as Hermes Trismegistus, who penetrates the vault, pronounces the name of God correctly, and restores the seven liberal arts and sciences back to mankind. The other character is a Greek mathematician known as Pythagoras, who goes in and has his Eureka moment. Eureka, I found it, right? And pronounces the name of God correctly and restores the mathematics pillar and mathematics back to society, back to the world. So the pillars within the Masonic tradition are two pillars that contain esoteric wisdom. And I'll just add real quick that this is not to be confused, because I specifically get into this in the book. This is not Yachin and Boaz, the two pillars of the Blue Lodge, J and B pillars. The pillars of Enoch are something else.
Okay. Well, at this moment, I think we have been going for 2 hours, and that's usually the length I try to keep to for these interviews. But I do want to give you a chance to talk about anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to say. And you've been really excellent at replying to every question and seem like you've got a really good, open, sort of at least intellect towards everything that you're doing, and a positive sort of approach. Is there anything you'd like to say about anything?
Well, first off, I'd like to just say thank you, Carrie, for having me on Project Camelot. I really appreciate you having me on. I thought it was a tremendous show. I try to give honest answers as best I can. I thought you were very fair, and I appreciate it, and I'll gladly come back on if you ever wanted to have me back on. Perhaps when my other books come out. Just to finish off, again, thank you, and if you're listening and you were interested in what I had to say and you're interested more in my books and about me, just please visit my website. It's www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is robertwsullivaniv.com. Links there to my YouTube channel, other podcasts I've done, social media, Twitter. You have any questions about me, or you want to know more about me and my books, or links to buy them, please just go visit that website. That's really the easiest way. And thank you, Carrie, for having me on Project Camelot. I thought it was a tremendous show, and I would have no problem coming back on if you ever wanted to have me back on.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, and it's very likely we will have you back. So thank you again, and thanks everyone for listening. And this will go on to YouTube sometime between today and tomorrow, all things going as planned, and they stop the attacks on my website, hopefully. Anyway, take care. Thank you again, Robert, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Carrie.
Okay, bye-bye and good night.
Good night.